got ordained at the Washington National Cathedral, I went back home and started to write on Facebook about my day. It was an exciting day, and we absolutely had a great time. I wrote on there about how wonderful a time being with 11 other colleagues as we were ordained together. I talked about the sermon and how great it was, and the music, and about the 3,800 people that were there. There was so much excitement in the air, we couldn't hardly stand it. I also said how happy I was that I had family there, my wife and children there, my parents, as well as friends and my rector. But then I also had to throw in, just to have a little fun, I said it was also nice to have the President and First Lady at the ordination. Well, that grabbed a lot of people's attention. You're kidding me, the President was at your ordination? And I said, not the current President, one of the past Presidents. Of course, who I was talking about was Woodrow Wilson, who was actually buried and was just a few yards from me with his wife. Hey, I didn't lie, it was true. Matter of fact, he is the only president who's buried in Washington, D.C. And so, after writing that, I decided to look a little bit, read a little bit more about Woodrow Wilson, because I realized I was kind of ignorant about him. And so I started to read about him, and he was actually an interesting person. But it was the last year that really caught my attention. You see, his last year really in office, it was the end of World War I. And people were excited that the war had ended, and Germany had been defeated, and Wilson became an international star. People loved Wilson. This country had parades for him. They had parades in Europe, and they were just excited about him. And so everywhere he went, people just could not, they had to shake his hands. And he was such a great guy. He even sent gifts in Washington, D.C. to the orphan children whose dads had died overseas. He even sent chocolate and stuff to the children in Europe so that they would have something for Christmas in the devastation they lived in. They just thought he was a saint, and again, they could not get enough of him. So then he went to Europe. And then he began to talk about what he called the League of Nations, or bringing countries together and rebuilding Europe and bringing us so where we can all be allies together. And that includes Germany and helping them and building their economy and all that. Well, people suddenly didn't like that. God forbid we help the enemy. And suddenly, Wilson started to see his ratings going down. Even though he would go to Paris and they would have a big parade, suddenly people didn't really want to talk to him. He then, after Europe, he came back to the United States and felt the same cold water from people. And between, they were kind of bored now of the big hero. You know, shocker, we get bored of things. And between the League of Nations, people didn't really want to talk to him. So he decided to go on a campaign trail, and he went on train to city to talk about his plan and bringing us unified together, bringing the world unified. And the more he did it, his ratings continued to sink to an all-time low. The more he went down, the more desperate he was to talk to people and try to regain some of his status. And as he was doing it, at the biggest peak of his stress, he ends up having a stroke. And that was the end of his presidency. He was basically, until he left office, he eventually dies in Washington, D.C. What's amazing is we're talking about a span of a year. 1 year where the people of the world could not get enough of Woodrow Wilson to, they couldn't stand him, or they didn't want to talk to him. And they just put him kind of in shame. And it cost him his life. The human heart. Oh, the human heart and how it can turn. We all know what that's like. We all know, and we have witnessed how the human heart can turn on somebody in a second. We've seen husband and wife who say, I love you every single morning, and suddenly the heart changes. And they go their separate ways. We've seen in family, especially Thanksgiving is always a particular good one, but seeing family where, and I've witnessed this in my own family, where sisters love each other, or brothers love each other, but something is said, something is done, and the human heart changes, and they never speak to each other again. We've seen that with friends who have grown up as children and growing up together, that suddenly something happens between them, and they cannot give the forgiveness. The heart changes, and they're never friends again. We can do that with sports. We can do that with politics. We do that as human beings. Oh, the human heart and how it can turn. We see that today in Israel, in Jerusalem. Today is the day that Jesus decides to not only face Jerusalem, but now he's heading in there. And people love him. They've heard about Jesus. They've heard about his miracles. Now there's rumors that he may be the Messiah, the warrior king. And the warrior king, as you're growing up Jewish, you know, is planning to come and conquer the enemy and bring Israel back to its former status. It will be King David again. He will come and he will be with us. And we will destroy the enemy together. And Jesus goes and he gets a donkey. And you can imagine him being on this donkey as he's walking down. People begin to cheer. They have their palms in their hand. Hosanna the highest. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And they cannot get enough of him. They all want to touch him. And you can imagine as he's walking down into Jerusalem, they're seeing the picture of King David. He did the same thing. And as I told you last week, you can imagine the royal smell that's on him from the perfume. And they can all smell that and they know this is our king. And they take their branches and people take off their cloaks and put it on the ground just so the donkey doesn't have to touch the dirt. You can imagine his disciples around them like Jesus is a rock star and they're going, yeah, we're with him, we're with him, we're with him. After all, that 3 years of hard work is finally paid off. And now, especially Judas is going to be excited that the warrior king is coming into Jerusalem. This will be it. We'll be on his cabin. We've got it made. But the human heart changes. And it can change like that. And where they're presenting Hosanna in the highest with their palms, suddenly they are angry with Jesus. He doesn't go straight to the throne. He doesn't start to become King David. No. Instead, he goes to the temple and he gets upset with them and takes some cords and he whips some animals out of there. And then he takes the money changers and he spills their table. Why? Because he said, you're making my father's home a den of thieves. In other words, what they were doing is they were exchanging the money. They were cheating people out of it. And he saw that. And he said, no more. Now things are changing. Now you've messed with my business. Now you've messed with my cousin's business. Now you've made us upset. Now our high priest is extremely mad. And suddenly people's hearts change. And there they go and they take him. And they arrest him. And his disciples who thought they were with the rock star run like crazy as fast as they possibly can to get out of there so they're not caught. Jesus is alone. It's in that court as he's standing there with Pontius Pilate, who's also saying, let him go. He hasn't done anything. The people who had the branches in their hand saying, Hosanna in the highest, now have their fist in the hand saying, crucify him! Crucify him! Kill him! Let the murderer Barabbas go! Give us Jesus. Give us Barabbas. Kill Jesus. The human heart turns as they are laughing at him, as they put the thorns on his head, and they strip his clothes and they beat him with a whip. They laugh and taunt him even while he is up on the cross. Oh, the human heart and how it can turn. My question for you today is, how is your heart? How is your heart towards Christ? Does it turn? Does it flip-flop back and forth? Is it sometimes works a little this way, a little that way? Probably somewhere in the middle, yes. There are times that things happen in our life that our heart suddenly, we want to blame God for everything, even if it's our own mistake. There are times that our heart is saying, I want to be with Christ, and I love Christ, and I want to be close to Him. And suddenly things happen in life, and we walk away. When suddenly we realize we need Christ again, and the heart flips back, and suddenly things in life start to pull us away again. And suddenly we realize we need that relationship with Christ, and suddenly life again pulls us in another direction. Oh, the human heart. Our hearts can change in a heartbeat. It can change whether it's our spouse, our family, our friends, but even God. And what we need to do is make our hearts strong. And who we should look at as an example, a role model for all of us, is Jesus himself. You see, while he was in the court looking at the eyes of the people who were praising him just a few days ago, now saying crucify him, Jesus' heart never turned. When they beat him senseless with a whip, and God, you can imagine that, how horrible that was, his heart never turned. When they put the crown of thorns on him into his skull and he's bleeding, and they mock him, and they laugh at him, his heart never turns. As he's walking down the street of Jerusalem with his cross falling on his face, and the people are laughing, his heart never turned. And when they nailed him to the cross, and he's looking at all the people, his heart never turns. And as he's weighing heavier and heavier with the sins of the world, his heart never turned against you. His heart did not turn against you. Instead, he looks at the Father and says, forgive them. Forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. And instead of his heart turning against you, his heart turns to you, and he's resurrected so that you can all be brought together. He is the one that we need to have as a role model of keeping our heart centered, straight. Instead of turning our hearts against God, we need to turn towards God. And when the bad things as well as the good things happen, know that God is with us. That he walks with us and loves us. And he died for us. It is during this Holy Week we begin to walk in Jerusalem together. It's through this week that we will walk together as Jesus walked. There will be times that maybe we'll have tears flowing down our cheeks. But rest assured, there was resurrection. And you are all in it. Don't let your heart turn. For where your heart is, so is your treasure. Treasure Jesus Christ.